The Philippines is a country defined by the sea. With more than 7,600 islands and a coastline stretching over 36,000 kilometers, its defense and survival have always depended on the ability to control its maritime approaches. Yet when we examine the modernization of the Philippine Navy, a paradox emerges. Frigates are being built, corvettes are on order, submarines are planned for the next decade, but the essential enabler that allows any fleet to truly project power, naval helicopters, is almost absent. This missing link has profound implications for Manila's ability to deter adversaries, particularly in the contested waters of the South China Sea, where China's presence looms ever larger. For decades, the Philippine Navy relied on hand-me-down ships and helicopters that had little relevance to modern anti-submarine warfare. During the Cold War, it inherited small numbers of light helicopters, such as the AW159 and S-76, machines useful for light transport, liaison, or training, but incapable of carrying sonars, torpedoes, or anti-ship missiles. The result was that for the entire period from the 1980s into the 2010s, the Philippines had no real airborne anti-submarine warfare capability. Its ships could patrol coastal waters, but they were blind and deaf once they sailed beyond the littorals. Against a Chinese submarine force that was expanding in both numbers and range, this absence left Manila strategically vulnerable. The country had ships that floated, but no tools to extend their vision and reach beyond the horizon. This changed in 2016 when Manila signed a deal worth about 5.4 billion pesos, roughly $100 million US, to acquire 2 AW159 Wildcats from the United Kingdom. These helicopters were configured for anti-submarine warfare and could deploy dipping sonar, torpedoes, and lightweight missiles. They were earmarked for the 2 Rizal-class frigates, themselves modest but modern ships acquired from South Korea. For the first time, the Philippine Navy possessed a credible airborne anti-submarine tool. In theory, this represented a step toward joining the ranks of regional navies with proper layered defense systems. In practice, however, the limitations were glaring. 2 helicopters for an entire navy of more than a dozen major surface combatants is a token force, not a force multiplier. A single frigate needs at least 2 helicopters to sustain continuous operations, 1 embarked, 1 in maintenance or training rotation. The Philippines has 2 frigates and 2 Wildcats, which means the operational availability will always be fragile. Should a helicopter be grounded for maintenance or an accident occur, the entire airborne ASW capability of the country vanishes. Furthermore, the Wildcats are expensive to maintain, and the logistics chain depends on British suppliers, creating delays and costs that a resource-constrained military struggles to absorb. The contrast with regional peers is stark. Thailand, though often considered militarily stagnant, has maintained 6 to 8 naval helicopters, including Seahawks. Malaysia, with a smaller coastline, still fields Super Lynx helicopters that provide its Rizal-class frigates with basic ASW. Indonesia, which faces both the Indian and Pacific Oceans, operates Panther ASW helicopters to support its Sigma-class frigates. Singapore, always vigilant, maintains Seahawk helicopters that tie seamlessly into its advanced frigate fleet. And beyond ASEAN, Japan and South Korea deploy dozens of helicopters each, creating powerful airborne ASW networks. In this lineup, the Philippines sits at the bottom, a country with frigates but essentially no enduring naval helicopter capability. This absence undermines the credibility of the fleet itself. The consequences are not abstract. Chinese submarines, from the conventional Yuan-class to the imported Kilo-class, already patrol within the Philippine exclusive economic zone. Without helicopters to deploy dipping sonars and sonobuoys, the Jose Rizal-class frigates are left with only their hull-mounted sonar. That sonar may detect submarines directly beneath the ship, but it cannot sanitize a wide area or provide early warning. The result is that Philippine surface ships could be stalked with impunity. In a crisis, this vulnerability means that new frigates and future corvettes risk becoming little more than high-value targets. The next modernization plan, Horizon 3 covering 2025 to 2030, raises the stakes even higher. Manila is exploring the purchase of submarines, most likely from South Korea or France. Yet operating submarines requires not only the boats themselves, but a full ecosystem of anti-submarine warfare assets. Without naval helicopters, the Philippines would be deploying submarines into an environment it cannot monitor from the air, a dangerous imbalance that could erode deterrence rather than enhance it. The same logic applies to the future corvettes being built by Hyundai Heavy Industries, ships designed with hangars for helicopters, but which may never see those hangars filled if budgets remain tight. What options exist? One path is to purchase additional AW159s to expand the existing fleet. This would provide commonality and training continuity. Another, more ambitious option would be to procure MH-60R Seahawks from the United States, the standard ASW helicopter of many allies, including Australia, South Korea, and Japan. This would create interoperability with U.S. forces, but at a higher cost. A third path lies in closer cooperation with Japan, which could offer used SH-60Js or training pipelines for Filipino crews. Each choice carries financial and political trade-offs, but the alternative, doing nothing, risks perpetuating the current vacuum. The broader strategic context is unavoidable. China has already deployed the Z-18F, a large anti-submarine helicopter, to the South China Sea, operating from airfields built on artificial islands. It also has the Z-20, a utility helicopter comparable to the Black Hawk, and the Z-10 attack helicopter for maritime strike. In this environment, the Philippine Navy's two Wildcats are symbolic rather than decisive. If conflict erupts, the side with helicopters dominates the battle space by extending the eyes and weapons of surface ships hundreds of kilometers beyond their own radars. Without naval helicopters, Manila's fleet remains effectively coastal, unable to contest the open waters around Palawan, Mindoro, or the Batanes island chain. A navy without naval helicopters is like an army without artillery. Ships can sail, radars can scan, but the ability to shape the battle at distance is missing. The Philippines has invested in hulls and steel, but it has neglected the airborne layer that binds modern naval warfare together. To put it simply, frigates without helicopters are half-finished tools. If Manila wants its fleet to be more than a coast guard with better guns, it must bridge this gap. The question, therefore, is not whether the Philippines can afford naval helicopters. The real question is whether it can afford not to. Without them, every peso spent on new frigates and submarines risks diminished returns. With them, the Navy gains not only tactical reach, but strategic credibility. In a maritime contest defined by distance, sensors, and rapid response, helicopters are the multipliers that turn presence into power. The choice is stark, and the clock is ticking.